Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, a new indictment reveals the inner workings of a criminal network. How do Chinese money exchanges in the U.S. help Mexican cartels launder tens of millions of dollars using assets from China's ultra-wealthy? We unpack the connection. A key stop along the path to the U.S. for illegal Chinese immigrants now canceling a key visa-free entire policy. More on what Ecuador is saying about its policy change. A group of U.S. lawmakers met with the Tibet's exiled spiritual leader in India. They said they won't allow China to influence the choice of his successor. We look at Beijing's reaction.
China can express unhappiness if it wants. We're going to stand for what's right.
And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken joining an emergency call with the Philippine Foreign Secretary. That's to discuss China's latest actions in the South China Sea, ones that Manila and Washington say are escalating. A look at what happened. Over $50 million in drug sales allegedly laundered in Los Angeles through Chinese money exchanges. The Justice Department charged 24 individuals allegedly involved in the operation Tuesday. They are associates of Sinaloa, the Mexican drug cartel that's largely responsible for the fentanyl crisis in the U.S. Fentanyl took over 70,000 American lives last year. According to the indictment, the cartel associates worked with Chinese money exchanges based in San Gabriel Valley, California, to launder the money. The bust comes after a surge in Chinese-run illegal money exchange businesses in the U.S. in recent years. They have become the go-to option for Mexican drug cartels.
Chinese money laundering organizations have gotten very good at shielding ill-gotten gains. These organizations launder cartel cash quicker and cheaper than competitors, often with a money-back guarantee.
Chinese money exchanges charges come as low as 0.5% of the total, while traditional money laundering charges at least 5%. This cycle works because Beijing doesn't allow the wealthy to move more than $50,000 overseas every year. That's over fears of capital fleeing China. So to move more money, the ultra-wealthy turn to money brokers in the U.S. Here's how it starts. The Chinese buyer puts money in RMB, the official name of China's currency, the yuan, into an account specified by the broker. The broker then sends the same value in dollars to the buyer in the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. broker sources cash from Mexican drug cartels through selling illicit drugs in the U.S. To launder the money, the U.S. broker uses the money in the Chinese bank account to buy goods, which then get shipped to Mexico. After they're sold in Mexico, the money returns to the Mexican cartel. Back to the DOJ charges, at least 22 of the defendants have been arrested. China and Mexico arrested 2 that had fled the U.S. In 2022, Beijing suspended anti-drug cooperation with the U.S. following then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The 2 sides agreed to resume efforts to stop fentanyl production after President Biden met China's Xi last November. Most of the defendants are set to appear in court in Los Angeles in the coming weeks. If convicted, they could face a maximum sentence of life in prison. A key gateway to the U.S. for many Chinese immigrants is closing. Ecuador on Tuesday said it will suspend a visa waiver for Chinese citizens starting July 1st. Officials in the South American country are citing what they call an unusual increase in irregular migration. Ecuador has become the first stop for many Chinese immigrants hoping to settle in the U.S. That's because of its visa-free status for Chinese citizens. After arriving in Ecuador, Chinese migrants make their way through the jungle to Tijuana, Mexico, a border city just south of San Diego, California, where many attempt to cross into the U.S. In 2022, Ecuador documented around 13,000 Chinese nationals that entered its borders. Last year, that number rose to more than 450,000. According to U.S. Homeland Security in April, more than 24,000 Chinese people have entered the U.S. southern border this year. The flow has jumped over 8,000% compared to just 3 years ago. The surge has raised concerns among U.S. lawmakers. A group of U.S. lawmakers and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just met the Dalai Lama in India on Wednesday. The lawmakers made a pledge to the 88-year-old Tibetan spiritual leader, saying they would not allow China to interfere with the choice of his successor. The U.S. delegation received a warm welcome from the exiled Tibetans in India. The meeting came after Congress passed a bill supporting Tibet's rights, which the lawmakers say President Biden will sign into law. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the passing of the bill is Washington's signal to the Chinese regime, quote, "Things have changed now. Get ready for that."
The Dalai Lama knows that this is not true, that Tibet is part of China. And the people of Tibet know that that is not true. And the United States of America knows that that is not true.
China can express unhappiness if it wants. We're going to stand for what's right. What's right is to make sure that Tibetans have freedom. They're able to return to their native land. They're able to have and live and keep their culture and their history. That's what's right, and that's what's important.
On Tuesday, China's embassy in India condemned the U.S. delegation, saying the exiled Tibetan government is illegal and describing foreign support for Tibet as interference in China's internal affairs. Why is Beijing taking issue with U.S. lawmakers meeting with the Dalai Lama? NTD's Flora Hua explains to us more about Washington's long-standing support for Tibetan rights and China's opposition.
The Chinese military took control of Tibet in the 1950s and reportedly killed over 87,000 Tibetan people. Tibetan spiritual and political leader the Dalai Lama has since been exiled overseas. Washington recognizes Tibet as part of China, but strongly opposes China's human rights abuses there and its crackdown on Tibet's Buddhist culture, especially the freedom of belief. Chinese Communist Party leaders claim that they have the right to approve the successor. The Dalai Lama says only the Tibetan people can make that call, and that his successor could be found in India. In the past, the Chinese regime had kept another key Tibetan spiritual leader under house arrest in Beijing until he passed away. After that, the Tibetan people chose the spiritual leader's successor, but Beijing denied his authority and took him away when he was just 6 years old. The successor has been missing since then, about 3 decades. In 2022, the U.S. government urged Beijing to reveal his whereabouts. That history has people concerned that the CCP could repeat its actions and do the same to the current Dalai Lama successor.
From the heart of America's escalating drug and border crisis to the shadows of religious clampdowns, we examine Beijing's agenda pushed abroad and its tightening grip at home. Joining us now to discuss is General Robert Spalding, retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General and author of War Without Rules. General Spalding, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Now, as fentanyl continues to make headlines in the U.S., the Justice Department is actually alleging that Mexico's Sinaloa cartel has been working with groups in California that are tied to underground Chinese banking. That's to launder over $50 million in drug trafficking proceeds. How big of a deal is this connection?
It's a huge deal. Sam Cooper outlined in his book, Willful Blindness, all of the corruption going on within Canada. And it's no different here. And the specific corruption that he outlined was between the Chinese Communist Party, the Triads in Hong Kong, and the cartels. As I've talked to law enforcement officials in America, they think of this as a law enforcement problem. Let's catch the criminals. Actually, it's a systemic attack on the United States by the Chinese Communist Party, by, with, and through these other organizations. And so we have to take a systemic, approach to it. Whether that be cutting off China completely from trading with the U.S., something has to be done in order to stop this. Otherwise, it's just going to continue and accelerate.
Now, it's not just the drugs that have been coming across the border. There's records of Chinese nationals crossing illegally every day, seeming to set new records every day. Now, Ecuador is suspending a visa waiver agreement with China. They're citing a, quote, worrying increase in migratory flows. This is around Chinese nationals who are then leaving Ecuador illegally to enter the U.S. and other places. What do you make of this move by Ecuador? How could it impact our border crisis?
Well, I think it should inform our strategy with regard to Latin America and other developing countries. You know, one of the things that the policies that we have is enabling China to do these things by our economic and financial relationships. The other thing that's desired by these countries oftentimes is a relationship with the United States. So basically cutting ourselves off from China and at the same time offering an open hand to those in Latin America or other developing countries that might want to have a economic and security relationship with the United States is really, it's signaling that what Ecuador did, that's signaling that that would likely be very effective. And it would be beneficial to the United States because you would begin to swing the international order over to being more aligned with the United States than they are with China.
And now, switching gears a bit, a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers just met with Tibet's spiritual and political leader, the Dalai Lama, in India. Now, this is set with President Biden set to sign into law a bill that reaffirms Tibetan rights. Now, Beijing is firing back, warning that if the U.S. signs the bill into law, China will take, quote, resolute measures. Now, there are no details about what these measures would look like, but what do you make of this? Is it a serious threat from Beijing or just some posturing?
You know, they're already doing those bad things. So like, oh, we're threatening you, we're going to do bad things. So you're already doing bad things. So I think what they're very capable of doing in cases like Tibet is getting us to say their words for them. In other words, we want to impose independence. We want to acknowledge that Tibet's a part of China. No, we don't have to do that. And in fact, we can disagree, and we should disagree with the Chinese Communist Party in these policy pronouncements.
General Spalding, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The State Department has approved a multi-million-dollar arms sale to Taiwan. The sale was confirmed for drones and missiles worth about $360 million combined. The arms sale includes anti-armor loitering munitions and other related equipment. Loitering munitions are small guided missiles that can fly around a target until they are directed to attack. Taiwan's presidential office thanked the U.S. for its security commitments. It noted the deal marks the Biden administration's 15th weapons sale to Taiwan since 2021. The U.S. is bound by law to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself, despite the lack of formal diplomatic ties. Tensions are sparking in the South China Sea. Top U.S. diplomat Antony Blinken holding a call with his Philippine counterpart to discuss China's actions there Wednesday. This after a clash between Chinese and Filipino vessels. Here's more.
The Philippines urged China to avoid actions that endanger sailors in the South China Sea Wednesday. This comes after a Philippine sailor lost a finger during a clash Tuesday. Manila said Chinese Coast Guard vessels rammed Philippine boats and that the soldier lost his finger when it was caught between the two boats. 7 other sailors were also injured. Chinese Coast Guard troops also boarded the Philippine vessels and seized their weapons. They were attempting to stop the Filipino boats from supplying a warship on a disputed shoal. Beijing accused the Philippine vessel of intruding China's waters. The disputed shoal is located in the South China Sea, which Beijing claims almost all of. An international court ruled China's claim invalid. More than 60% of global maritime trade passes through this region. The U.S. reiterated its warning Tuesday that Washington is obliged to defend the Philippines in an armed conflict. The two are treaty allies.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-Focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Senators hear from experts with opposing views on the origins of COVID-19. They agree that the truth is hidden behind the Chinese regime's lack of transparency. North Korea and Russia signing a new agreement. They are pledging to help each other if either of them gets attacked. And could the combined military force of Russia, Iran, and China pose a credible threat to the West? Exclusive expert insight on that and more after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.